Well, this is the fourth day of Sesshin, when there's no turning back. When small things become big and big things become small. And unusual things occur. Yesterday we were visited by the spirit of Charlie Watts on drums. May he rest in peace. It was good. I'm a fan. Later in the day, we witnessed a flying quinoa event, which only occurs in Sesshin. In the morning, we can see the planets, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and Saturn in a line across the sky, close to the mountains, in the south-southwest sky, which is there, over there, over there. Shoot. Thank you. Today, my topic is our Buddhist ancestors, revering the ancestors. So let's begin with our first ancestor, the earth, and our ancestor sun, and our ancestor atmosphere, three of our very early ancestors. So take a breath. And as you exhale, fall into the earth by the force of the earth's gravity. Inhale the earth's atmosphere. Allow the earth's atmosphere to lift the body. Now exhale, falling into the earth. Allowing neck, shoulder, back muscles to relax and fall into the earth. Inhale the earth's atmosphere, allowing space in the body, down to the belly, lifting the torso, the chest with breath. Now falling into the earth. This is how we will begin revering the ancestors, earth and atmosphere. When we walk outside in the day, we see sunlight. We don't actually see objects. We see light from the sun interacting with surfaces of things. We don't see the things. We see light. We have eyes that have evolved to see certain light in a certain way, and that is what we see. We walk in starlight, stepping on the earth, breathing the earth's atmosphere, nitrogen, oxygen created by plants. All our food comes from plants or animals that eat plants. Plants eat sunlight, turn it into sugar. They drink water and they inhale CO2. They exhale oxygen. We inhale oxygen and exhale CO2. We require sugar and oxygen to live, like most all living things do. We live in a web of ancestors. When I swim underwater, past sponges, anemones, sea stars, some of which are probably going extinct on the Pacific coast due to incremental changes in ocean temperature. So I swim past jellies and mollusks and fish. and I can feel their ancient heritage, and I feel their presence in my being. You know, we share DNA with these animals. We evolved from them, from sponges, our first animal ancestor. On land, we walk on rock and soil, where the remains of our ancestors lie: bones, shells, hair, nutrients incorporated in Earth's minerals. GB told me the sky stops at the soles of our feet. We walk through sky. We breathe sky. We are held by the Earth's gravity. We have a specific relationship with the Earth's gravity, according to our mass in relation to the Earth's mass. It's specific and it's personal. We are surrounded, formed, enlivened, held, and refreshed by these ancestors, known and mostly unknown. Our very bodies are composed of these ancestors. For me, this is a lens, a mind lens, a language for understanding no self, in which we are a changing composition of ancestors. And I don't even belong to me. We belong altogether to each other and to the earth and sky. I do not have control or ownership, yet I am my responsibility. Even though I am an ever-changing composition, I cannot shirk the responsibility given to me as a body in this moment, this iteration of life on earth, this precious, brief life on earth. I bear responsibility for the whole of it, and certainly for my part of it. This is our Bodhisattva vow: to take responsibility for my health and well-being on behalf of others and for the work that is asked of me in this life. With that, I wanted to create a context for taking a look at our Buddhist ancestors, a context that is present, personal, and pertinent, one that might bring our whole heart and our lives in their own particularity to light. I thought that since I talked a bit about the first and the sixth Chinese ancestors, Bodhidharma and Huineng, last week, I would fill out the list of the first 6 ancestors in China, beginning with Bodhidharma. And that'll be about as far as I get today. There's a lot of ancestors. Bodhidharma is a semi-legendary person, perhaps from a Brahmin family in southern India, perhaps from Persia. He traveled to China in the 5th or early 6th century, which makes him a contemporary of King Arthur. The legend of King Arthur dates to a time when the Roman Empire was in decline and withdrawing from the British Isles, allowing an opening for Germanic tribes such as the Angles, the Saxons, the Franks, the Visigoths, the Goths, and the Vandals to invade. King Arthur was a leader who unified forces in Britain to fight these invasions and to establish a religious and ethical code. He was an important symbol, but historians don't think King Arthur was a real person. By most modern standards, China and India were among the highly developed regions and cultures of the world at that time, in terms of religious, intellectual, and artistic and economic considerations. There is evidence from accounts of the period that Bodhidharma was a real person who came to China intending to teach Zen. However, his famous encounter with Emperor Wu of Liang may or may not have actually happened. To recap that story, Bodhidharma visits Emperor Wu, who asks him, "What merit will I accrue from building all these temples and other good works?" And Bodhidharma says, "No merit." Then Emperor Wu asks, "What is the meaning of the highest holy truth?" Bodhidharma answers, "Emptiness, nothing holy." Then Emperor Wu asks, "Who is it who stands before me?" Bodhidharma answers, "I don't know." Bodhidharma leaves, travels north, and sits in a cave for 9 years. That's the legend. This story may or may not have actually occurred, but it does illustrate a doctrinal and political dispute between his predecessors' teachings based on sutras such as the Lotus Sutra, which teaches the power of vows and beneficial action for acquiring merit, as well as high-ranking political position, and Bodhidharma's teaching, which is often expressed with this verse: "A special transmission outside the scriptures, not depending on words and letters, directly pointing to the mind, seeing into one's true nature and attaining Buddhahood." Bodhidharma, for the most part, did not teach from sutras, except for the Lankavatara Sutra. The Lankavatara Sutra emphasizes the nature of mind, which means the Yogacara tradition. So I'm going to tell you a little about Yogacara. It was an important body of work dating from about the 4th century. And it became the companion teaching of Zen, along with the Madhyamaka school, which was developed several hundred years earlier. The Yogacara Sutra is the Lankavatara. So this would have been a pretty new doctrine that Bodhidharma was introducing to China. Yogacara is a bit complicated, but I think we can understand the drift of Yogacara from a modern point of view by considering our senses. As I said at the beginning of my talk, our eyes see what the evolution of our eyes at this time allow us to see. And we see light. We think we see objects, but we actually have created a mental model of the world we think we live in, full of objects based on our own very limited range of sensory experience. There are animals that see better than us and different from us. There are animals that hear and smell better than us and different from us. There are animals that have senses that we have nothing like. We tend to think we all live in the same reality, but there is plenty of evidence that we just don't live in the same reality, not even with our fellow humans, let alone with other animals, plants, and so on. So that sense that reality is a shaky construct of our mind, I think, is the way that we can get a whiff of Yogacara. If reality is our own mental construct, and it continues to cause us grief and suffering, then studying the mind directly itself seems a worthy project. That was Bodhisattva's practice, studying the mind. The meeting between Emperor Wu and Bodhidharma, in which they failed to understand each other, lays the ground for the Zen tradition distancing itself from political and doctrinal issues as distractions from the simple, straightforward practice of observing the true nature of mind. Bodhidharma's practice, which was Bodhidharma's practice in teaching. This trend, that is the distancing from political and doctrinal issues, this trend came to full fruition through Huineng over a century later, and was augmented in the following century by the Anlushan rebellion, which resulted in a major exodus of the northern Chinese population to the south. The flourishing culture of agrarian Zen temples and wandering monks meeting and conversing about the Dharma grew out of these historical events. Bodhidharma, 2 centuries earlier, lived in dangerous times. In fact, he may have been poisoned by adversaries. The circumstances of his death are a mystery. He remains an important legendary figure and icon in Buddhist history and throughout Asia. One such legend, you may have heard, is that after his conversation with Emperor Wu, he left for the mountains, where he sat in a cave, facing the wall for 9 years. But he kept falling asleep. So finally, in frustration, he ripped off his eyelids and threw them to the ground. And there sprouted the tea plant, Camellia chinensis. I happen to know that because I planted one in my garden. Of course, any Zen person knows how important caffeinated beverages are to us in this practice. Bodhidharma had a woman disciple, Zongzhi. She was the daughter of one of the Liang dynasty emperors, maybe Emperor Wu, but I don't know. I couldn't find anything about that. So there's a story of Bodhidharma asking his 4 main disciples to demonstrate their understanding with a statement. And I won't tell the whole thing, but I will say to what he answered to each of his disciples' statements. The first, he responded with, "You have attained my skin." The second, "You have attained my flesh." The third, "You have attained my bones." And the fourth, "You have attained my marrow." The fourth was his disciple, the second ancestor, Huike. But disciple Zongzhi, her statement was, "According to my understanding, it is like a glorious glimpse of the realm of Akshobha Buddha. Seen once, it need not be seen again." Bodhidharma's response was, "You have attained my flesh." Now, commentaries about this story have not been kind to Zongzhi or to the other 2 disciples other than Huike, saying that her understanding was lacking. But Dogen rails against this interpretation, saying that each of these disciples answers were correct. And how could it be said that marrow is superior to skin, flesh, or bone? To us, Dogen is making perfect sense here. If we ask ourselves, okay, what can I do without skin, flesh, bones, or marrow? Or if I could only have one of those, which one would I take? Dogen points out the absurdity of ranking understanding this way in his fascicle Twining Vines. I thought about Dzongcher's response in a different way than her critics. Perhaps she glimpsed the glorious realm of Akshobhya Buddha and was satisfied, not greedy, ready to get back to work. Such a glimpse cannot be held on to, yet it changes everything going forward. So she said, seen once, it need not be seen again. Special experiences are great, but I don't need to haul them around with me. I travel light. Akshobhya Buddha represents the practice of changing hatred and dislike into wisdom. Bodhidharma's successor, the second ancestor, was Dazu Hueka. He was born in the late 5th century. The legend about him is that he actually was an intent practitioner of Zen from a very early age. He's kind of a boy genius in his family. Of course, his family thought he was odd, but they sent him off to the monastery anyway. He was happy. And he was very, very intent. He was large. He was said to have 5 lumps on his head. We don't know what that means. So the legend is that Hueka heard about Bodhidharma in the mountains in the cave, and he went to find him, and he waited outside Bodhidharma's cave in the snow for a long time to be accepted as a disciple. In frustration, he finally cut off his arm to give it to Bodhidharma to show his sincerity. I don't think we're particularly on board with this sort of behavior. Ripping off eyelids and chopping off arms. In fact, the truth of this is unlikely. However, political turmoil continued on and off in Hueka's life, his long life, in the northern kingdom of Wei, where there was much violence. He lived there for 40 years. He fled his temple for the mountains, seeking refuge from danger, where he met his disciple, Tsangtsan. Tsangtsan is the 3rd ancestor. Hardly anything is known about him because Tsangtsan lived during that period of persecution of Buddhism in the 6th century. The government closed temples, destroyed monuments and records, and forced Buddhist clergy to defrock, marry, and return to the general population. Which, by the way, the Japanese forced on Korean Buddhists in the 20th century. Tsangtsan is especially remembered for his poem, sometimes translated as Trusting the Mind. This version, I'm going to read a portion, is translated by Red Pine. The way isn't hard to find, just to avoid choosing. When preferences are gone, it's perfectly clear. The slightest distinction parts heaven and earth. To find it right now, stop taking sides. Fighting over sides is an illness of the mind, Until you understand the mystery, you still your thoughts in vain. It's perfect like the void, nothing missing, nothing extra. Because you grab and throw away, it doesn't look like that to you. Don't chase dependent things. Don't settle for emptiness either. In all embracing oneness, everything disappears completely. I recommend reading this poem by Sung Tsan. It goes on for several more pages. The first line of this poem may sound familiar because it is well known from the koan of Zen master Zhaozhou. The way is without difficulty, just avoid picking and choosing. So Zhaozhou is quoting Sung Tsan's poem. The person who came to be the fourth ancestor is Dao Xin, late 6th, mid-7th century. Dao Xin found Sung Tsan living incognito in the mountains, but knowing his reputation, he approached him to pay his respects. The record of this conversation is this. Dao Xin, I ask for the master's compassion. Please tell me the gate of emancipation. Sung Tsan, who has bound you? Dao Xin, no one has bound me. Sung Tsan, then why are you seeking emancipation? According to the story, Dao Xin experienced great enlightenment. He was 14 years old. He stayed on as Sung Tsan's attendant for 9 years. And by this time, the persecutions had ceased and Sung Tsan had become well known. Dao Xin was the teacher of Hongren, Hui Neng's teacher. There will not be a quiz. Dao Xin. Here's a piece of writing that he did that endures. The 100,000 gates of the Bodhidharma, they all return to this mind. The source of the countless exquisite, sublime practices is this mind. All the precepts and monastic rules, Zen meditation, Dharma gates of knowledge, and wisdom, and every sort of miraculous manifestation are your natural possession, not separate from your mind. So those are Dao Xin's words. And in those words, we can hear Hui Neng, 2 generations later, who says, good friends, you already possess the prajna, wisdom of enlightenment. And also he says, I take refuge in the pure Dharma body Buddha in my own material body. So we're hearing this teaching carried through the generations. And we can hear these words in our own Zen meditation practice, in which we return and return and return to this body, this mind, this place, this breath, this moment. Dao Xin's life spanned the short Sui dynasty to the Tang dynasty, when Buddhism was more accepted and temples could flourish. But even so, Dao Xin founded a monastery which may have taken up farming for the first time in Buddhist history, in order to be self-supporting and to remain independent from government, from the throne. He's credited with broadening the appeal of Zen by bringing the austere tradition of Bodhidharma together with more popular Buddhist traditions. And, you know, the excellent book by Andy Ferguson, China's Zen Heritage. Andy Ferguson writes this. His contributions are bringing the Bodhisattva practice, the Bodhisattva precepts to Zen practice, bringing the Lankavatara Sutra into the Prajnaparamita literature, such as the Heart and Diamond Sutra, and incorporating chanting into Zen practice. We appreciate these contributions every day in our practice of chanting and renewing our vows. And we're focusing on ritual this practice period, I think enjoying and benefiting from this study. We have fourth Chinese ancestor Dao Xin to thank for this. Dao Xin gained fame and influence in his life, but which was only eclipsed by his disciple Hong Run. Hong Run continued to broaden his teaching and influence to include different trends and currents of Buddhism of that time, while also earning the reputation as a master of the Lankavatara Sutra. And Hong Run was definitely friendly with the throne. I'd like to quote Andy Ferguson's book, Zen's Chinese Lineage. It's a great book if you're interested in Chinese Zen history. But I'd like to quote him on Hong Run. He writes, "His stature and recognition during his own lifetime was probably much greater than the meager historical records we have of him indicate." And he goes on to say, "His students spread throughout China, exerting enormous influence on the religious fabric of society." And lastly, he says, "Hong Run's influence on Zen's historical development is difficult to overstate." So this guy was a giant. Huineng, our sixth ancestor, was a disciple of Hong Run. I've spoken quite a bit about Huineng as an iconoclast representing defiance of religious convention, which is for us a beloved recurring trend in Zen's long history. You know, burn the Buddha, or Dogen's statement that Norman reported on, which actually came from Zhaozhou. If you meet an enlightened 7-year-old girl, you bow down to her. I don't want to hear about rank. That's Dogen. I changed the language. There isn't a lot of evidence for the story of Huineng as an illiterate young man who, upon hearing a stanza of the Diamond Sutra, was awakened, traveled north to meet his teacher Hong Run, impressed him with his understanding such that he received Dharma transmission not long after arriving at the monastery. In fact, the story tells of political intrigue and factional disputes among 8th century Zen schools, which seems to be a constant in human history. But the influence of his story and of his person and of the Platform Sutra in Zen is pivotal, and the teaching of this sutra still inspires us today. So, jumping ahead about 1400 years, I'd like to talk about two great contemporary women Zen ancestors. They're Blanche Hartman and Katherine Thanas. Both have died. Blanche Hartman was the teacher of Zenju Earthlyn Manuel. Blanche started her practice at the Berkeley Zendo in the early 70s, which is where I met her. She and her husband Lou were strong, active members of that Sangha, always warm and welcoming. Over the years, we practiced together in Berkeley, at Tassajara and Green Gulch, and Blanche was co-abbot with Norman. She was always devoted to practice and to helping others, and she just got more loving and more kind and more grandmotherly as she aged. She grew up in the South in a well-heeled, liberal, activist family. She told the story once of a memory she had from childhood. The KKK had put a cross on their front lawn and lit it. So the family looked out the window and there was a burning cross on the front lawn. So Blanche's mother picked up a silver pitcher from the dining room table and ran outside in her frock with her silver pitcher and poured water on the cross to put out the fire. This was an image that Blanche reported with very good humor. I'd like to read a couple of short pieces from her book. This is her book. It's called Seeds for a Boundless Mind. And I have a couple of things I've picked out. This one's short. This is called One Who is Awake. Now, this Buddha nature that we talk about is not something mysterious or arcane. Buddha just means awake, one who is awake. So we find out how to align ourselves, how to be awake, and to align ourselves with our true intention, with our true being, with the wisdom and compassion that is already inherent in each being, including you. You are not the one single exception to the fact that all beings are Buddhas. You are not that exceptional. Here's another, let's see. This is another, this is an excerpt from another talk called Be Kind to Yourself First. Let's see. If we're all Buddha, if we are all interconnected like that, or inter-are, as Thich Nhat Hanh, a renowned master of Vietnamese Zen, would say, then an all-encompassing love has to be our experience. So for me, having that understanding, I just don't know how to say how meaningful it is to me and how much I hope you will have this experience in your life of this warm-hearted connection with everyone, with all beings. We are interwoven with each other. I am you, and you are in me. And to come into your own realization of this deep connection that you have with all beings is the greatest gift that you could get. Blanche had 4 children who went in really different directions. One of her sons married a Japanese woman, and they both converted to Orthodox Judaism. And they had twin sons, and those twin sons are friends with my twin sons, and they grew up to be Orthodox also. So they live in an Orthodox community, Japanese American, Jewish American people. So I'll talk about Katherine Thanas next. Katherine Thanas was Fugan Yudin Bush's teacher and Monshin's grandmother teacher. She met Suzuki Roshi at age 40 in 1967. She was an academic and an artist. She'd studied with Richard Diebenkorn. Really smart, really creative, amazing person. When she met Suzuki Roshi, she took up Zen practice completely and never looked back. I practiced with her at Tassajara in the late 70s, And later I visited her in Monterey and Santa Cruz, Zendos that she founded. She was direct, fair-minded, and very helpful. And she had the biggest smile. She also became more loving, kind, funny, and grandmotherly as she aged. So here's an excerpt from her book, which is called The Truth of This Life. You can see here. This talk, which I'll just read a little bit, is called This Very Mind is Buddha. That's from Dogen. Realizing you are Buddha is a very sobering experience. This wasn't exactly the Buddha you had in mind when you came to practice. You were looking for another Buddha, maybe a 16-foot golden body, an exciting, powerful Buddha. Yet at some point, we come to realize the Buddha body we are seeking is inside, not somewhere else. Take the backward step and return and turn your light inward to illuminate yourself, says Dogen in Beyond Thinking. Illuminate the mind that doubts itself, contradicts itself, equivocates. Illuminate that mind. Instead of avoiding it or being pushed around by it, illuminate it. Open up into that mind. That is the mind of reality itself, actualizing itself. That's just the beginning of this very good talk. So learning about these people who lived thousands of years ago or a decade or two ago, up to the present, for me is like sticking my head in a deep cave and hearing a chorus of voices singing to each other and to me through time, up to the present. And what we can learn from this sort of study is that our effort in this practice contributes to the chorus. And we carry the ancestors forward, and we are the ancestors. And that is the gift we hold to give away. Thank you very much.